In this corner, we have Grok, Elon Musk's AI, fresh off Twitter. And in the other corner, we've got OpenAI's ChatGPT, trained on the collective knowledge of humanity. Today, the challenge: can it design a classical building? The prize? My respect. Let the showdown begin. My name is Clayton Vance. I'm an architect trained in classical and traditional architecture. I designed hundreds of homes and multiple commercial buildings, and we're going to have some fun today. For those of you who are still actually fairly new to the whole AI business, what we're looking at is two different large language model systems, which is the LLMs. One is Grok, which Elon just released, and then ChatGPT continues to release version after version. In terms of ChatGPT, launched in November 2022, ChatGPT 3, and then 4 in 23, and then 4.0 in 2024, and there's another one coming up very shortly. Trained on billions of text documents, books, codes, internet data, everything that is online. Its strengths: it has a strong grasp of language and pretty decent reasoning. It has a good understanding of classical principles, maybe Vitruvius and Palladio as a reference. And so we'll see what it can do. And then it's polite. It treats you fairly nice. It's articulate, often academic. It can describe the internet in a very clear way. Its limitations, however, it doesn't generate images natively. It must be paired with DALL-E or Midjourney or another image generating model. And it tends to be fairly cautious and overly general at times. It sometimes gives idealized textbook answers versus real-world creative solutions. Boiling it down to its essence, ChatGPT is essentially the nerd who read every single book on the planet and taken this SAT 5 million times and still apologizes when it's wrong. You know, that's ChatGPT for you. In the other corner, Grok, Elon Musk's new AI, it's allegedly a little less filtered and kind of goes rogue every now and then, and might be less educated in classical architecture, and we're going to find out. I haven't played with it yet, and I'm very interested to see what actually happens because I've been told it's pretty amazing. So it was a launch. Quick facts on Grok: it was launched 2023, first time, and trained by xAI using a mix of public internet data and access to X. And so its strengths: supposedly it's less filtered and more candid, and it has a good casual tone, bold suggestions, can be surprisingly creative, chaotic, depending on the prompt. But its limitations: it's not as consistent or reliable in technical niches like classical architecture. We're going to find out if this is true. This is what the internet's telling me. And is it less polished? Its less polished reasoning can go off topic quickly. And it doesn't have built-in image generation either, and it must also be paired. So we'll be testing both of these things, pitting them against each other, and see which one produces a better result. So, same prompt, different minds, and we're going to see what happens. Okay, we're going to give both models a similar prompt, but we're going to use each one to help generate the best prompt. So at the height of the Renaissance, one of the architects that wrote a treatise called the 4 Books on Architecture is an architect named Andrea Palladio. Palladio did a pretty famous house in close to Vicenza in Italy called the Villa Rotonda. We've got ionic columns. We have a perfectly proportioned entablature, pediment, and beautifully proportioned columns. And this is essentially architecture in perfection, according to the principles in the Renaissance. All right, let the games begin. All right, we're going to go to ChatGPT and Grok. So in order to do this, I wish we could actually test Grok itself, but it's not an image generation thing. So what we want to do is see how successful each of these programs are at creating a prompt that generates the most classically appropriate building based on Palladian principles. So the prompt I want that we're going to do for Grok and ChatGPT, please provide me a Midjourney prompt to create a reimagined contemporary, this should be interesting because we're going to make it contemporary classical villa based on Andrea Palladio's 4 books on architecture. And I want to get specific about the column I want it to use. I want it to use the simplest one, which is a Doric order, not some big fancy printing column. 4 books on architecture using the Doric order. This should be interesting. Enter. prompt is coming. I'm going to copy this exact same request, put it into ChatGPT, compare these two prompts, put it into Midjourney, and see what happens. So, Grok, Imagine prompt. A reimagined contemporary classical villa inspired by Andrea Palladio's 4 books on architecture featuring the Doric order. The villa showcases a harmonious blend of classical symmetry and modern minimalism. Okay, this should be weird. With robust Doric columns. That's going to get fat. Clean lines and a serene color palette of white marble, soft neutrals. Really? White marble? The structure emphasizes Palladian principles of proportion, balance, and geometric clarity set in a lush, manicured landscape with reflective water features and modern glass accents. The design integrates open, airy interiors, large windows, seamlessly connected indoor-outdoor spaces rendered in highly detailed, photorealistic, vibrant natural lighting, blah, 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 blah. This is going to be wacky. This is going to be wacky, I can already tell you. So here's the Midjourney prompt from ChatGPT. A reimagined contemporary classical villa inspired by Andrea Palladio's 4 books on architecture, emphasizing perfect symmetry, tripartite organization, and harmonic proportions. All very Palladian, featuring a robust, once again using freaking robust. Why robust? It's going to get fat. Doric order with fluted columns, and it's fluting them. Okay, weird. Entablature with triglyphs and metopes, which is Doric, rusticated base, grand central pediment, loggias, and axial floor plan executed in warm travertine and limestone, not marble, which is what Grok gave us, set in a serene Italian countryside landscape, soft natural light. Okay, let's put both these things into Midjourney and see what actually happens. Grok, first copy. Paste. Midjourney. Copy. Oh, paste. Imagine. Apparently, failed to submit. Stop photographic. What happened? These prompts aren't working. Okay, that one is going. ChatGPT is on its way. And now Grok is the Grok prompt is also on its way. Huh. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. What does anyone want to know about right now when it comes to both of these things? Because I'm willing to bet that everyone out there is looking at this. You're looking at these things like, well, yeah, it all looks like the same thing. It's a bunch of columns with this big giant porch in front. What do you see different, Clayton? What do you see different? That's the question everyone's asking right now. One of the interesting things about classical architecture is you're beginning to, as you begin to understand it, is a language that has very specific syntax and rules to follow and how you actually execute so that you can really be speaking the language and creating poetry with it. What is interesting with what we are looking at right here is none of them are actually following the language perfectly, but all of them are interesting in their own little way. This is a Grok prompt. Now, did it get the columns right? No, not even close. And you can't do an entire, I mean, the whole thing looks like it's all marble pediment up here. It's missing tons of parts and pieces. The overall scheme and general vibe is kind of right in terms of the proportionality. And so the overall scheme of this thing sort of works, but it's missing all of the details. And it's the details that actually make classical architecture. Getting those details right. This thing right here that we're looking at, that's not a Doric column. That's some funky, weird, modified Ionic column. And No one in classical architecture has windows that are more horizontal than vertical. It happens occasionally, but rare. And in this case, it's weird because it looks like the whole front of this thing is tiled marble, and it's still getting the details wrong. It's missing entire parts and pieces of the columns. Once again, generally the proportions, generally the things are right from a first glance, but once you get into the details, it's just a cartoon. And so, meaning that can't design and build that thing. Nope. This, once again, someone forgot that it's supposed to be Doric and not some version of Ionic that doesn't exist. So this is interesting. There's no pediment. This is definitely a modernized version. This is a contemporary version of classical architecture, which I think is somewhat interesting, believe it or not. You have these two flanking wings with super tall windows that look floor to ceiling and tons of glass in the middle. I think this is actually pretty cool. This is a very interesting contemporary interpretation of Palladian principles. Still, once again, some of the details, pretty wonky, messed up, but overall, I'd live there. That's honestly kind of cool looking. Next, okay, trying to go back to the White House. This one's completely wrong. Jeez. Anyone who actually understands classical architecture would actually be laughing right now at the variety of things that are just weird. And I really don't understand what's happening with the doors. It shrinks down to little person height, or it's like, okay, I can walk through this, but my 2-year-old can walk through that. And also the windows, doors, all the wrong proportions. I don't know what's going on with all the grills, grates, and that type of stuff, or what happened to the entablature as it's going around. Weird. And this whole pediment thing, why is it set back from the front of it so far? I don't know. This one's the worst of all of them, even though it's sort of kind of almost got the actual Doric order right. Not quite. Oh, yikes. So this is the ChatGPT response, not Doric. It obviously doesn't understand what Doric is versus these are Corinthian columns, even though they don't fully look like Corinthian, but you can't really tell because we're too far away. It actually has the right proportions in terms of the pediment and what that looks like and how it wraps around. And then we have this lower course, this balustrade that goes around, and it just looks like it's falling apart. I wish it looked a little bit not like it was falling apart, but it is travertine-esque. These are fluted columns. That it got right, but it still is missing the details in some aspects. In the end, it's just too much stuff. Just too much. Too many pediments, too many windows, too many this, too many that. Okay, this is wild. Also, not Doric. The columns are fluted. Things are too thick. Nothing ever gets that recessed. This honestly looks like something that you'd find in unsuccessful attempts to do classical architecture in the, I'd say, height of the neoclassical movement, when everything started getting just a little bit more and more exaggerated. And that is the difference between Palladio, his Renaissance treatise that talked about the 4 books, and all the other stuff that began to follow, is everyone just kept thinking more is more. More is better. Let's just put more depth, more this, more that, and more flavor on this icing and turn it into a cake that has too much icing rather than substance. This one's a little bit more simple. Once again, still not Doric. It's got fluted Corinthian columns. It is simple. I think it's fairly successful. I don't know what's up with these arches on flanking either side. They're kind of an odd proportion, but it's not bad. Oh, interesting. So this one actually does have Doric, but it's missing the one important section of the capital, and it decided to add these arches. So this is definitely an interesting modern interpretation, and it's got this really nice porch coming off. It, on the inside, once again, really screwing up the details. Right, so here's my general analysis of what's going on here. Grok and ChatGPT definitely have two different prompt styles, and obviously give you very different results. Both of them are not actually successful yet. There are some elements, the general elements of what classical architecture is, are somewhat applied successfully, but all of the detailing of what classical architecture is completely failed abysmally in all respects, just down the line. The biggest issue I see is that it has the same level of intelligence that you're honestly a typical person has when it comes to understanding classical architecture. And I don't want to say there's anything wrong with that, other than the fact that if this is what we do, we continue to get Disneyland and Las Vegas rather than Italy. I think most of us, what we're trying to do, when clients come to me and they say, hey, I want a traditional looking house or a traditional building, one of the reasons people steer away and shy away from real classical things that look like this is it looks too formal, too ostentatious, too much, too in your face. And the reason it looks that way is because the proportion of the details are wrong. When you go to some of these Palladian villas in Italy, you don't have that same reaction. It doesn't look like it is trying to be too much. What I mean by this is all of us begin to understand or interpret a thing a particular way, and in our mind's eye, we think, oh, this is a classical building. We like this because it has columns and a big porch on the front. It's like, there's a lot of refinement to this. This is the bubblegum pop of classicism. It's a misinterpretation of what actually authentic classical architecture could be. There's some things that it got close with the general principles and those general ideas, but when it came to the details, the real things that make it classical, completely missed, and it ends up being more like Las Vegas's interpretation of refined aesthetics. So, Elon, I'm going to send you a little text right now on Twitter. And Elon, I just tried a Grok prompt for a classical building. It sucked. Please fix. Post. So in the end, it looks like we have a long way to go before the software and the so-called intelligence gets to a point where it understands the fundamental aesthetic authenticity of traditional and classical architecture. We'll try continuing to train it on our side. And please do not trust AI yet, because it still kind of stinks. Till next time, I'm Clayton Vance.